You're listening to That's Pretty Dark,
the podcast where we talk about all of the entertainment that scared us as children
and still haunts us as adults. So grab your flashlight and join us as we take a frightfully nostalgic look over our shoulders
and under our beds
and in our closets.
And together we'll realize, whoa, that's pretty dark.
Pretty dark.
Welcome back to
Gross.
That's Pretty Dark. My name is Kaylin.
And I am Christian Mott. I'm full of pizza.
That's great.
And now I have beer, so I'm really excited. I'm excited to be in the listener's chair.
I'm full of vegan mac and cheese, and I'm coughing because I've had a chronic cough for most of my life. You know, the typical nerdy kid issues.
I don't think that was a stereotype of nerdy kids. I think it was like inhalers.
Coughing, sniffling. They were like, inhalers, asthma, allergies, all that stuff.
Yeah, I guess allergies. I guess I just meant, I don't know. I always saw like inhalers and glasses and stuff, but
I had inhalers. I didn't have glasses though. I'll leave the glasses to you. And to Gary. And to Gary, our fearless leader, our bespectacled butt cut guy.
The butt cut. Yeah.
We do love Gary.
I had a stutter as a kid.
Oh.
I saw a speech therapist like one time. He turned out to be a pedophile.
Whoa. That's a whole other ballgame.
Yeah.
That's a whole other story.
He didn't get me.
Thank God.
And there was a raid on his office, and they found a bunch of child porn on his computer.
That is
his actual like patients that like kids he was seeing, because he was like, well, how I really need to observe your child is in his natural environment. So I'll need to come to your home and spend some time with him in isolation. Like
that
he literally
is
was trying to sell that idea to my parents, and they were like, wow, check please.
No way.
So
yeah, thank God your parents were on top
I know
of
my
it.
parents are smart, thank God. So
yeah.
We got out of there. A lot of kids are not that lucky, and
No,
it still
not.
happens, and it's awful. It's happened forever, but it's
horrible.
Just it's like
horrific.
I just can't imagine. So, I got out unscathed.
Yeah, you made it.
I made it out.
You made it.
And I am.
Well, unscathed relatively. You were unscathed in that situation, but
in
general,
situation. Yeah.
Gosh.
So anyway, that brings us to season 1, episode 1, which I'm so excited to hear and learn about from you.
Yeah.
Because these stories are all about people who come after children, try to harm them.
Mm-hmm. You know, these situations that they're put into or the villains that they meet, part of it was to relate to kids, but also another part was to say, like, to kind of have kids go, I don't have it that bad. You know, my gym teacher wouldn't lock me in the basement, you know, like,
right.
Whatever it is, like these villains were larger than life and helped put real life in perspective. But not to say that there aren't real life monsters, because obviously there are.
For sure.
But I'm excited to talk about the first episode of the first season of Are You Afraid of the Dark, called The Tale of the Phantom Cab.
Correct.
As we talked about earlier, this wasn't the first episode that was shot of the series. It was actually filmed after the fact, after the pilot, which turned out to be episode 4. So everybody in this episode, it's kind of cool because they had to go back and say, no, but wait, you know, we have to explain who these kids are and what they're doing and all that fun stuff. So this episode kind of tees up the Midnight Society and introduces everybody for the journey that you're going to go on for the next several years of successful children's horror show.
They really just did that. They were like, okay, cool. We're just going to open on the first episode and just basically give you a quick rundown of like who we are and what we do.
And I mean,
it's pretty cool.
You know, but we love stuff that kind of throws us in the middle. So it wouldn't have bothered me if they had aired the pilot first. But
I know.
It's a kid's show. So I understand the need or the impulse to like go back and kind of fill things out. But I will say it was the first episode, as we kind of talked about, to air as part of like a regular season during the SNICK block on Nickelodeon, the Saturday Night Nick block. SNICK. And it aired originally on August 15th, 1992, and was obviously the beginning of an era. And they talked a lot about, you know, Saturday night TV and that being a bad night for TV generally, but not if you tap into the right audience. And so this was kind of that.
Yeah.
And then eventually there was a teen Nick element to it. I think Are You Afraid of the Dark aired on that too. So it kind of stuck with that sort of crowd. I have a note here to kind of talk about the ratings, because in all of these things, all the things that we're going to discuss, it's kind of like, who let us watch that, or who put that on TV, or how did that even end up happening? It is geared towards children, obviously, but the material is usually pretty dark. But Are You Afraid of the Dark has a rating of TVY 7 from the FCC, the Federal Communications Commission, which
7.
It's suitable for anyone age 7 and older.
I would not say that.
I personally wouldn't either. I would at least say 12, maybe 10
I was
going to
say like 11. Yeah.
I certainly watched it when I was 7. I did.
Well, we did, but you see how we turned out.
Exactly. And that's kind of the whole idea here is like, probably wasn't like surprising that it was Y7, but that was kind of the rating system at the time. It was like, and I maybe even still, you're either under 6 or you're suitable for 7 and up. And I feel like there's some more steps that should be taken in that.
There's gotta be.
Were the 7-year-olds older back then than the kids today? Or was it because of the stuff that we watched that we were more mature? Don't really know.
I don't know. I would say that 7-year-olds are older today. Like, it's different because they're exposed to so much more. They have the internet to look into. Like,
true.
They can go find things at 7 years old that we couldn't find at 7 years old.
Very true.
Like
TikTok. Ooh. But like they consume things today that maybe are not suitable for 7-year-olds, but I still somehow think that we had the maturity, which it's probably just because I was, 7 in the 90s, but like, I don't know. There's a maturity that I feel like isn't all the way there today. Now we're just on a kids today rant.
These kids today.
That's not necessarily what we're here for, but might come up from time to time.
Anyway.
The Tale of the Phantom Cab was directed by Ron Oliver, and he actually got his start directing this 80s cult classic movie called Prom Night 2. It was the second one.
Okay.
It didn't directly relate to the first. It just used the same setting, which was like a high school, but it was basically like a slasher. It was a Canadian slasher movie.
I want to watch that.
And this particular movie revolved around a vengeful young woman who died on her prom night in 1957.
Dang.
So it's kind of cool. I love the prom night ghost idea. Like, I feel like there are a lot of iterations of that in different places, even in Are You Afraid of the Dark?
Oh, yeah.
And I haven't seen this film, but I think it's cool that that's where he kind of started.
Was it for kids?
Oh, I don't think so.
Oh, gotcha.
Not from what I saw, but I probably would have watched it.
Just like an urban legend slasher movie.
Yeah.
Nice.
And then he also directed, which I haven't seen these either, but as soon as I was looking it up, I instantly wanted to. He directed episodes of a Nancy Drew series and a Hardy Boys series in 1995.
Wow, I didn't know that existed.
So he's kind of doing a lot of the things that are quintessential to my childhood in that. And then obviously Are You Afraid of the Dark? But then after Are You Afraid of the Dark, he also did several episodes of Goosebumps and that show, I don't know if you remember, The Animorphs.
Yeah, of course.
Which it kind of has a similar vibe. It's not necessarily horror, but it was weird. Where the kids, morph in and out of animals. And I remember that as a book series too. So he's done a lot of those things from our childhood.
Nice.
And the episode was written by Chloe Brown, which we learned last time is actually DJ McHale, the show's creator. That was his pen name. And so he wrote this episode as well. He actually wrote 19 episodes as himself, and he wrote 15 episodes under the pen name Chloe Brown.
Wow.
So I wasn't able to find why, why he did, the pen name or why it was Chloe Brown.
I need to know why. I want to ask him.
Yeah, please, DJ,
God,
tell us.
Why would you do that?
Explain yourself. And you probably want a summary of the episode.
I absolutely want a summary.
The summary on IMDb says, 2 brothers, while lost in the woods, come across a mysterious cab driver and a very unusual man named Dr. Vink, who won't let any of his victims go unless they solve a riddle.
Vink.
So that's the IMDb summary with a v. My personal summary is more like 2 brothers who would still only care about arguing with one another, even in the face of certain death, meet some real creepazoids in the woods, and then they try to solve some riddles under extreme pressure.
Nice. Nice.
I'm going to tell it like it is, that's just what happened. These folks in the woods are weirdos. I probably would have just run screaming at the first mention.
These kids never do what we would do. They always do the opposite.
It wouldn't be a horror if they did.
Right. You gotta make some bad decisions.
Something's gotta be scary.
Got to. Sweet.
So the episode opens with this 10-second shot of nothing but the campfire. So you're hearing Gary talk, but all you see for 10 seconds is the campfire. And so this is the world's introduction to Are You Afraid of the Dark as a series in this moment. And just all you see is the campfire. And I kind of love that they did it that way, because as soon as you're stuck staring into that campfire for a second, it begins your suspension of disbelief. It engages whatever that is as a child, where you sit around a campfire and tell stories and have that moment of it's almost sacred.
Yeah.
And so they really place you there with that shot, which I thought was really great.
That's nice, yeah.
And you're waiting for somebody to kind of betray the warmth of the fire and the friendly voices and like say something scary. Mm-hmm. And then it all changes. And in that case, that's what Gary does, kind of. He kind of begins to explain what the Midnight Society is.
We're called the Midnight Society. Separately, we're very different. We like different things. We go to different schools, and we have different friends. But one thing draws us together: the dark. Each week, we gather around this fire to share our fears and our strange and scary tales. It's what got us together, and it's what keeps bringing us back. This is a warning to all who join us. You're going to leave the comfort of the light and step into the world of the supernatural.
And my heart is just like, yes, I want to be a part of this. This is something that I should be involved in. Mm-hmm. And I love it. And that's why we're here too. It's the same thing, basically.
Did you ever have those nightmares where you had the normal scene, whatever you were doing with like your family or your friends or whatever? Like for me, it was always in like my room or like the backyard or something. But there was always like edges to the dream where it was darker. Like I had like an actual like perimeter to this to the scene of my dream.
Whoa. I guess that has happened to me in dreams, but I feel like that's common in TV too, like especially stuff like this, where it's just like you go just a little beyond where you're supposed to be.
It must have come from shows like this. Yeah. Just teaching me about how like the light is safety, the darkness is not safety. It's dangerous. Mm-hmm. So I love that he said that, like the comfort of the light. I always say the safety of the light. Mm-hmm. And I always venture off into the darkness in my nightmares where I'm trapped. I can't get back. Puppets come to life. Things start talking to me. It's super scary.
I definitely have those moments of like, I've landed somewhere where I can't get back to where I was.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that resonates.
And I feel like I really need to. Like, that definitely happens.
Oh, yeah. And that's all the kids in these stories, especially this one. They're literally lost.
Yeah, in this story, it's literal. And I feel like it does happen pretty often where we don't know where to go. We don't know where we are. We've gone too far, essentially. It's when you take something too far.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's kind of what a lot of this kind of media is warning against. Mm-hmm. Stay in your lines,
Yeah, be careful.
Don't go past the edges.
Be very careful.
Unless you're part of the Midnight Society.
Yeah.
Which I love.
But even if you don't, here are some lessons. Here are some things you can do to get back. Like it's almost some weird...
This is how you handle it.
Non-specific guidelines. Yeah. Cool. So he introduces the Midnight Society.
Yes. And after he gives his little speech and his warning, he like kind of gestures to the darkness, and these two kids come out of the woods, and one of them is blindfolded. And we learn that the blindfolded kid is named Frank, and he's wanting to join the Midnight Society. That's his goal. And Gary kind of outlines the rules for that. We talked a little bit in another episode about that, like induction. There's this sacredness. There's this ceremony to what's happening. And it's very much understood, like, you must be inducted. You must have this, like, process to become one of us kind of thing. And so he's blindfolded, and Gary says, before we can let you in, you have to tell a story, a scary story, obviously. Then the group is going to vote on whether or not you can come in, and it has to be unanimous or you don't make it. So it's a lot of pressure, You walk into this area, you don't know where you are, you don't know who you're with, and you just have to tell a story and hopefully appease these people. Mm-hmm. So kind of scary in general for a kid to just kind of have to be on the spot and do the thing.
Yeah, but not Frank.
But not Frank. Frank doesn't mind.
He's like, I'm ready. Are you ready?
He's more like, can you please take off this blindfold? And Gary's like, no, not until you get in. They make it very clear that they don't want anybody that's not in the Midnight Society to know where they are, which makes sense.
It's a secret location. Yeah.
Very secret. His sponsor is with him. That's his friend David. He's another member of the Midnight Society. And Gary says that as the sponsor, David has to do the honors, basically. So he produces the classic, iconic cloth bag with the magic dust inside, which we learned what that is last episode.
Go back and listen to it.
Yeah. If you want to know, go listen to it.
Go listen to it, you jerks.
You lame balls.
Cheese balls.
And so he holds up the bag, and he has Frank say the words, magic words, And he's like, you remember how? Like, I guess he's kind of coached Frank up on it before they walked in, which is fun. And Frank says, submitted for the approval of the Midnight Society. He calls the story The Tale of the Phantom Cab. And David does the honors and tosses the dust into the fire.
Boom.
So, such a great moment every single time. Never gets old for me.
So good. It never, ever gets old.
So then we meet, you know, the protagonists of the story in the story. And it's two brothers, older brother Denny and younger brother Buzz Crocker. Denny is the classic, like, big, strong, punky kid, you know. And then Buzz is kind of he's smaller, a little less sure of himself. And they kind of describe him as, like, a geek or, you know, the lesser, which is, you know, whatever. The goal, Frank basically says, is that Buzz is looking for an opportunity to prove himself to Denny. Yeah. He's a man, too, kind of thing. And kind of living up to this older brother idea of what a person is or should be. Yeah. I feel like that's pretty classic in a lot of 90s media movies. You have this sibling dynamic, and I'm one of two. I have a younger sister, and she's 2 years younger than me. But I feel like she was usually picking on me, not usually the other way around. So it's always funny for me when I see, like, stories like this, because I'm like, I mean, I understand that, but I never really had an impulse to, like, intentionally annoy her, because I just was like, please leave me alone kind of thing.
I was the youngest of 2 sisters, and they bullied me.
So you understand how this goes.
I was the wimpy little crybaby.
You're the Buzz. You're the Buzz
claustrophobia
in this picture.
Yeah, I cried like every day. That was me.
Man, that's rough. Rough time.
Yeah, it was pretty bad.
As we know already, and as the listener knows, if you listened to our pilot episode of Are You Afraid of the Dark, go back and listen to it, because we talk about it for a second. It's pretty cool. But Denny is played by Jason Tremblay, and he also plays Bostic in the pilot episode. So we talked about him for a minute. He's pretty cool in the world of horror.
Emphasis on the boss.
That's right.
And the stick.
Okay, and then, so Buzz is actually played by a guy named Sean Vertigo, which, I mean,
Vertigo.
That's a dope name. Vertigo.
Nice.
Also terrible. I hate Vertigo.
Yeah, my dad has it.
Ugh, it's genetic, so watch out.
No, I think I have it too, for sure.
But Sean has a smattering of credits, also including a 1996 episode of Goosebumps.
Ooh.
I think he's more into, like, music videos these days. The credits that I found for him, he's, like, writing, producing, directing music videos, all with very suggestive titles. So not sure what's going on there, but it sounds like he's having fun. He's having a good time.
Good for him.
Yeah. And the thing that I really wanted to point out about Buzz is that, again, if you go back and listen to our Tower of Terror episode, we talk about the reporter character in that film. His name is Buzzy Crocker.
Buzzy Crocker.
Clearly, DJ had an affinity for this name. And as I mentioned in the Tower of Terror episode, he named these characters after one of his first characters in a student film of his from NYU. So he just hung on to that. And I mean, I respect it. Yeah. You know, you find a name you like, you stick with it. Stick with it, I guess. He used it 3 times, at least, that we know of.
I had to rewind it and go back and, listen to me, rewind. I had to scrub backward on my smart TV to watch this. But I was like, what are they doing in the woods? It's really never explained why they're lost or where they are.
Yeah, they just say they're on a hiking trip.
There's no explanation of what they're doing, where their parents are, what's going on. Nothing. Nope. They're just alone in the woods.
Yeah, we pick up and they are literally wandering through the woods.
The younger brother's clearly like a Boy Scout.
That's what I was going to say. I think he's in Boy Scouts.
But do you get the feeling Denny's like knows what he's doing?
I guess so.
I can't tell.
Because I wonder about this, because as we see, Buzz he kind of makes a lot of mistakes on this hiking trip. Yeah. And it's like, who put you in charge? Like, why did you put him in charge? Right. You know, like, you could easily be in charge, but, you know, Buzz has the compass, Buzz has the map, and he's supposed to be the leader of this little expedition for some reason, even though Denny is clearly more capable.
And Denny's like, you said you could get us through, or like, you said you knew how to get through. And he's like, I did. I know what I'm doing. It's like, well, why didn't Denny just take charge in the first place? But now we're reading too far into the story.
Well, we'll get there. We'll get to some of this stuff. Yeah. But in that vein, like, one of the first things we hear is that Denny is like, you know, automatically right off the bat, he's just calling Buzz all sorts of things, all sorts of names.
I have a list of these names.
Do you? You have all of them? I wanted to talk about one in particular because one of the first ones he calls him is Tonto. And I took that as a reference to, like, the Lone Ranger. Tonto means stupid in Spanish, but you would assume that it's a reference to the Lone Ranger because the, character in the Lone Ranger was the sidekick and like they were out on an expedition and whatever. And so that's the place that your mind goes, I guess, especially in the 90s. Kids are people that were of age watching in the 90s. And as soon as I realized that, because I knew that, but then once I absorbed it, I was like, that's hella racist.
Oh yeah.
That's really not cool because
exactly.
he's Native American and his name is Tonto. And that really rubbed me the wrong way. And so I kind of dug into it a little bit because I was like, that's not cool. I don't like it. And of course it probably did and would happen. And that's awful. But
right.
Yeah. So the show was originally a radio show and then it became a show in the 50s, like a TV show. And it was ABC's first hit TV show, The Lone Ranger. Obviously, Tonto does literally translate to dumb person or stupid in Spanish and Portuguese and Italian.
Wow.
And so a lot of countries dubbed it and they changed his name to Toro, like the bull,
Nice.
or Ponto. So they shifted it. But the story, and this is, Wikipedia, the story is that the creator of the Lone Ranger had neighbors from the Potawatomi tribe in Michigan. And they told him that the name Tonto in their language meant wild one.
Okay.
And so if you want to give him the benefit of the doubt, this, guy, creator of Lone Ranger, I guess you could and say he took it from their language and was unaware that it meant something derogatory.
Yeah, could be.
I would love for that to be true, but I don't know if I'd buy it because, you don't know. And I not cool. But anyway, all that to say, that's his first insult right out of the gate.
Either way, it's used as an insult here.
Yes. Regardless of if they knew, it is definitely meant as an insult here, which is, it's got some racist undertones I am not fond of.
Sure. Do you want to hear the list of...
yeah, hit me with the other...
I think this is an exhaustive list of all of his insults.
Every thing that he calls him on this
throughout this episode. Yeah. Forgive me if I missed one. Okay, tell me if I did.
There were a lot.
There were a bunch. When I wrote them down, there weren't as many as I thought there were going to be. So I'm like, did I just miss a couple? Anyway, so the list is Tonto, cheeseball, lame wad, loser, jerk, genius, sarcastically.
Yep.
Worthless.
That's pretty intense. Worthless is
pretty literal.
That's a lot.
Toad was one. Just toad. And my favorite.
Toad.
Nutbag. Oh God, which, I'm going to laugh at that every time. 100% of the time. Every time.
And we know that it comes back. We learn eventually that it comes back. I will discuss, but that insult is common on Are You Afraid of the Dark? I don't think that the insults are warranted necessarily, but Buzz isn't doing the best job at leading them where they're going. He spills the canteen on the map, and then he slips off the edge of this embankment right after Denny says, "Hey, watch the edge," and he slips right off of it. And during this part, it kind of made me laugh because a lot of Buzz's dialogue seems to be ADR'd.
Oh yeah,
recorded after the fact, and so it's just funny, all the little yells and screams and things that he's saying. It's all totally dubbed in.
There's a lot of that, yeah.
But he slips off the edge, and so they're having a time. Denny rescues him and basically says, "I should have let you fall." So I don't think that's not quite an insult, but it's still a mean thing to say.
Still pretty mean.
But night is falling very quickly on these boys, and they're having a hard time finding their way back to where they're going. And they've been following Buzz's compass for hours, he says, and they're lost at this point. And then at this point, this is when Denny decides to ask Buzz whether he knows what he's doing. It's he's relied on him for hours, and then now he's going to question if he knows what he's doing. Do you know how to use a compass? That kind of thing. This is when he begins to ask questions, which I think is funny.
Gosh.
But they discover, or Denny points out, he asks, Buzz is like, "No, we've been going south the whole time because the compass is pointing north, and we're going this way, the opposite way." And Denny's like, "Well, genius, you're holding it near your belt buckle, and that's acting like a magnet, and so your compass is, being affected." I don't know that from personal experience, but it absolutely can happen.
Yeah, I was going to say, yes. I meant to look it up to see, because it's obviously a magnetic pull.
Right,
but
it's metal.
I didn't know if your belt buckle would
be strong enough. I didn't either, and it sounded kind of far-fetched. It sounded like the convenient thing.
Yeah.
But I looked it up, and it absolutely can happen.
Okay.
It's very common that happens. So
good to
word
know.
To the wise, if you are traveling and you're using a compass, keep it away from your belt buckle or any other metal object. I feel like that should be talked about more. is my point, because I had no idea that could happen.
Yeah, rule number 1 of Boy Scouts.
Yes. And maybe it is. Maybe everybody that was in Boy Scouts is like, oh my gosh, shut up about the compass. Everybody knows that, but I didn't.
Maybe.
So there you
Maybe
go.
it's one of those obvious things that we don't know about.
So then Buzz is like, no, I know the way. And then he runs off into the woods, which...
Don't do that.
No, you don't, clearly. If you knew the way, you would have found the way by now.
He's like, I know this place, right?
And at that point, I'm getting a little annoyed as an older sibling, because I'm like, oh my God, like, you can't just run off into the woods. That's not cool.
Yeah,
and
right.
in, true fashion, bad things are going to happen to kids that run off into the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
This flashlight comes up through the woods, over the hill, and they have a little bit of conversation about it, and Buzz is like, maybe it's a maniac killer in a hockey mask who's going to slash us.
Right.
Which I thought was really good.
And then he's like...
Of course it probably is.
He's like, maybe I should do the talking. Like, he's like, you should...
Yeah, he's like, let me handle this.
Gosh,
Which,
so
finally, funny. Like... Thank God Denny's going to handle something, He'd been kind of a freeloader at this point, like relying on his little brother to get them out of trouble.
He's just been insulting him and not even helping at all.
Yeah, not helping in the slightest. So he kind of steps up to take the reins on this one. But this dude comes out of the woods.
And this creepy mofo.
Yeah, he introduces himself as Flynn. And they're like, oh, are you a ranger? And he's like, oh, he laughs it off. He's like, not a ranger. I'm just a traveler like you. And anytime an adult talks to you like that, in that slow way, it's very unsettling, unsavory, not cool. So immediate, creeper vibes. Me and Buzz both are like, nah, man, this guy. Don't like him. And they're like, are we far from town? And he's like, oh, farther than you know, my friend, farther than you know. And immediately I'm like, I don't want to talk to you.
Putting off a real creepy vibe, Flynn.
Yeah, Flynn, you don't have to. Nobody asked for this. Like, just, can you help us or not? Yeah, let us know, please. And don't act like this. So then Flynn's like, no, I can help you. He says, I'll take you to someone who can help. No, just take me the heck out of the woods. Like,
yeah.
Don't take me to someone that can help.
I don't want to meet anybody
Can't you
else.
help?
Right.
But apparently not. So he's going to take them to someone that can help. And then as they're walking, he explains that there's this doctor that has a cottage in the woods. At that point, I think I would respond and be like, I don't need a doctor. I need to get out of here.
Yeah, right.
I need a park ranger. I need someone that's going to get me out of the woods. But they follow him because what choice do they have? And they're like asking what he means and why does a doctor live here or whatever. And he's just like, patience, boys, like real slow and scary like.
God.
And then he starts to ask them if they're good at riddles.
Red flags.
And they're like, why do you need to know if we're good at riddles? And he's like, just asking. That's all he says, just asking.
Nobody needs to know that.
And so they keep going, and eventually they reveal this cabin, like a hut more so in the woods. It looks literally like, a hut where Denny says to Snow White and the Seven Dwarves live here.
Yeah, right.
Or just the Seven Dwarves. It's very like Hobbit-like, this hut. And there's this ominous orange light, spilling out behind the door. Mm-hmm. And Flynn brought him to this man for help, and he says that they should be sure they really need help before they go asking, because the price he charges is a little steep. So you know that we need help, but you're telling us to be sure we really need it before we go knock on this door.
And how far did he walk them through the woods before he's like, oh, by the way, make sure you really want this, kids. Like,
I've already followed you.
They could have just walked like 4 miles. I mean, we don't know how long it's been.
Yeah.
Good grief.
These poor kids, they're going to freeze to death. That's what they keep saying. They keep saying it's so cold and they're going to freeze. So yeah, kind of awful. Don't like that, Flynn. Don't like that at all. He then immediately just disappears. There's no more Flynn. All gone.
No, he's all chuckles.
Just chuckles. And I had a note here about that kind of thing where he, seems almost off-puttingly good-natured. He's not immediately evil. He's not repulsive. He's just too nice.
Yeah, that's like Mrs. Clove.
Yeah.
She's like, special boys. I got a special treat for you, special boys.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, oh, God, stop calling me special. I don't like it.
Anytime that somebody is too nice like that, like sickly sweet is the... And Flynn's kind of like that too.
Saccharine molasses.
Ooh, don't like it.
Stop it. When adults are too friendly
yes,
or too understanding of the children, it's too much. You're up to no good. Don't try to.
It's exactly what my mom would warn me about.
Yeah.
Like the whole stranger danger thing, but there's this weird nonchalance about it. I'm too casually asking you to come do this or too casually mentioning this to you, this fake, vibe. And it's such an instinct for a kid, I feel like, to know that that's kind of, and it may be part instinct, but part the stranger danger, all the stories and things that we're told and warned about. It's that's off-putting and you know something's wrong.
Oof.
And that's a lot of villains. Like, it happens a lot in Courage the Cowardly Dog and that sort of thing.
You play nice. You pretend.
Playing nice, and it's horrifying.
It's all trying to lure you in. Yeah, God, it's so scary.
Horrifying. Yeah. But if you're wondering, Flynn is played by Brian Dooley, and that's a Canadian actor, and he comes back actually for an episode in season 4. And I didn't find a smattering of things that he's done, really.
No smatterings.
But if you're listening and you want a mental picture of this dude, just like imagine Andy Richter, the actor, and then just imagine that he has a Canadian accent.
Andy Richter.
And then maybe some pale makeup. My favorite thing that Andy Richter has done, he was in a Mary Kate and Ashley movie called New York Minute, and he was like the villain in that movie, but he's done a bunch of other stuff too.
Yeah, but he does have a very familiar face. He has that face.
Has that going for him. And the Canadian accent, what's more friendly than a Canadian accent?
Oh, clearly Canadian.
Yeah, so he's told them basically, don't ask for help here unless you need it.
Gee, Flynn, thanks. Good advice, pal.
What do you think? What are we going to do? Do we ask? Do we not? But they're obviously, Denny's just insulting Buzz still left and right. Yeah. And as they're debating, you start to hear these like snapping twigs, in the bushes around them. And then you start to hear like this sound, and at first it's really hard to tell like whether it's a laugh or a cry, and that is so scary to me. Honestly, like you don't know what it is.
Yep.
You don't know if it's good or bad, like you can't tell, but it's this sound that you start to hear, and then there's this like howling scream, and then like a chorus of howling screams are added to that, and then there's this wicked laughter that joins in, and so it's just all of these like
wild,
spooky sounds, and all the sounds were great. Except I started to laugh because it's like juxtaposed with these insert shots of the bushes next to them, and they're violently shaking, like someone is standing and shaking the bushes.
Yeah.
And it's
so
like
funny.
You hear these sounds, and so they're meant to be coming from the bushes, I guess. But as an adult, that kind of took me out of it a little bit. I was like, you don't have to like violently. You could just like show a picture of a bush blowing in the wind, and I'd be scared.
Do you get the? I got the vibe that these voices were trying to like push them to the house, to the cottage.
Yeah.
Don't second guess this.
You can't go anywhere else.
Go.
There's nowhere else to go. We are surrounding you. This is surrounding you. You have no choice.
We find out there's a reason for that later. But we won't get to that yet. But so yeah, you kind of feel like they're second guessing it. They might maybe decide to leave, but this is the last straw. It pushes them to the door.
Yes.
They have nowhere else to go.
Yes. And so these violently vibrating bushes lead them to go ahead into the hut, and they start just banging on the door. The door opens, and it reveals this like bearded guy, very wide eyes, just kind of looking at them. And he's not evil. There's not that like, there's something sinister, but it's not like an apparent evil.
He's very whimsical.
Yeah. He's just, whimsical is a good word. You don't necessarily trust him, but you're not terrified.
He's not scary.
Either.
He's more like,
he's not scary.
He's aloof, sort of devil may care, I guess. He's just sort of like, he's aware that they are there, but he doesn't directly address them except in pieces.
He's almost always somewhere else. It's that classic like mad scientist character that's just like elsewhere.
Mad scientist, right.
You know that he's not with you really. He's thinking about something else.
He's aware of you moving, because if you were to try to leave, he would know you were trying to leave.
Right.
But he's not looking at you, and he's talking to himself.
Yeah.
And so it's weird. It is scary.
Yeah, they're almost always talking to themselves more than they are to you. And that's off-putting too.
It's that idea that like adults feel like they just control you no matter what.
Right. Yeah, they don't have to address you.
Yeah, it's spooky.
Yeah. So he leads the boys inside, and they're in kind of a scientist lab in this hut. So there's all these beakers and bottles and potions and liquids everywhere, jars, experiments.
Yeah.
And he's talking about riddles already, and then he introduces himself as Dr. Vink, and then it's a recurring thing. They say Fink, like with an F, Fink, and he says, no, Vink with a V. And he says that almost every time, I think maybe every single time he's introduced, because Dr. Vink actually does come back throughout the series.
The inside of the house reminded me a lot of the Sanderson sisters from Hocus Pocus.
Yes.
The inside.
Me too.
It was just like spot on. Maybe more like beakers and glass.
More
scientific, but same vibe.
Yeah, and so Dr. Vink is played by Aaron Tager. We mentioned him a little bit last episode.
Right.
But he was an artist, poet, and sculptor, and he's from Brooklyn, New York. And then he moved to Canada, and he started acting in theater. And he is married to Anne Page, who played the witch in the last episode, the villain, which is super cool. Are You Afraid of the Dark was his first television role, actually. And Dr. Vink is the only recurring villain in the series.
Wow.
So a lot of sources online kind of say he's like the main antagonist of Are You Afraid of the Dark, because he does return.
That's interesting that there's never like a distinct Are You Afraid of the Dark, the return of Dr. Vink.
I know.
Something specific that's him focused, since he's such a big player throughout the series.
Comes back quite a lot. I think that'd be cool. I wish they would do that.
Yeah, it'd be dope.
I'll tell you in a second why they can't necessarily.
Well, I can guess.
Anytime there's a need of a mad scientist kind of person, he shows up.
Yeah.
And the Wikipedia notes say that his activities were usually villainous, designed to put the characters in peril and allow him the last laugh. And it makes me think of like Count Olaf in Series of Unfortunate Events. Yeah. It's like he's always going to don these hats to like gain control.
Yeah, super
and
interesting.
Dr. Vink is that way throughout the episode, or throughout the series, I mean. He appeared in several Canadian films, including The Busy World of Richard Scarry in 1993. Yes. And he was also in one of my very favorite movies of all time, Serendipity in 2001.
Really?
He played the janitor that's cleaning up the chairs after the wedding, and delivers the pretty like iconic line.
Yeah.
Or iconic information, iconic news, I should say.
That's awesome.
So
I did not know that.
Kind of great. But unfortunately, he did pass away in February of 2019.
Yeah.
So fairly recently. Super sad. Rest in peace, Aaron.
Prequel, young Dr. Vink.
Oh, the origin story.
The origin story.
We're getting so many villain origin stories lately. I would see that.
I would totally watch that. Yeah, that's crazy. He had a pretty good career then. Wow. Just to like all of a sudden like move to Canada and like get into theater, and then you're just acting all of a sudden, and all this big stuff.
Big stuff. Big Canadian. Like all those were filmed in Canada. So
yeah,
pretty cool.
Clearly.
So Dr. Vink, then he's really cheerful, way too excited, way more excited than he needs to be. And so he offers the boys some tea, and then he informs them that he's, studying nature and he's conducting experiments in the forest. Yeah. And he tells them that he wants to harness the electric impulses that continue in the brains of creatures after they die, which immediate red flag. I'm tipped off. Even as a child, as a 7-year-old or younger, perhaps, I understand. I understand what's going on at this point, and I don't like it.
I have a tangent planned.
Oh, yes.
For this, if there's nothing else you want.
I mean, he holds up this slimy, goopy goo, which is very Nickelodeon, very 90s. You like the gross out kind of stuff in a much more practical and like tactile way.
Yeah.
And he says that it's a boar's brain. And so then he starts in on his, you need to answer some riddles for me. And then he tells them that riddles exercise the brain. And where would you be with no brain? And of course, immediately I'm thinking, oh, you want their brains to be nice and exercised. You want lots of electricity. Like, yikes. Very scary.
For them to talk about this in the 90s again, I'm sure that was just a reference to like Frankenstein stuff and like mad scientist, stuff like that. But in 2019, scientists were able to, for anybody who doesn't know, revive a dead pig brain. Like it had been dead for like 4 hours, and it was pigs that had been slaughtered for food consumption. They didn't like murder a pig to study.
For science, yeah.
It was something that was going to happen anyway. So they were able to basically create this like chemical soup that was consisted of like oxygen and nutrients and other things, and put the brains in this like soup. Ugh. And then they were able to actually bring the brains back to life.
Wild.
So that the cells were functioning. Like it wasn't a dead brain anymore. Like it stopped decomposition. The cells were alive. It didn't go into like decay. It didn't go into death mode.
Wow.
It stayed alive for as long as they wanted it to. And that's the craziest thing to me. And it freaked me out because for it to maintain its ethics, they made the conscious decision, pun intended, to not let it achieve awareness and consciousness.
Ooh.
So they had to actually...
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah.
They had to change certain or like not activate certain parts of the brain.
Like if it were actually in your body, it would have an immune system, like blood cells. It would have all kinds of stuff given to it that allows us to be conscious and be aware. If we give it its awareness back, it's literally alive. And that's unethical because we don't know what that means. We don't know what that does.
No.
This is a threshold in scientific experiment and scientific study, since people were literally like opening up corpses to study, the anatomy of a human body. Like it's the most taboo thing we've done in a long time, aside from like stem cells.
Wow.
And that kind of stuff. But like even that's like a little bit more straightforward. This, they just don't know what's going to happen if they bring a brain back to life. And they can.
As you were describing the brain in the bowl, I was like, what would that awareness even
What would it be like?
We have no idea.
Is it just the worst pain you ever felt? Are you just in pain? Or do you feel nothing?
Because I mean, they're definitely,
It's
our
insane.
pain receptors in the brain, like that trigger pain. I feel like,
know.
I don't know. I have no idea.
The cool thing about it is once they can figure out the ethics, they were like, we just have to figure out what this means for humans. Because it plays a lot into brain trauma, like physical trauma to the brain. It changes people in comas, people with any kind of brain injury or anything, like a brain development that isn't quite developed. They might be able to actually finish developing your brain using whatever this science is.
And a thought that I had as well, it's like if somebody has a terminal illness or they know that they're going to pass away or something like that, you have the opportunity to ask for consent, which really helps in those situations. Ethically, you could have somebody sign something to say, I allow you to experiment on my brain. and in that case, I wonder if it reminds me a little bit of like Houdini and all of his seances and like going to the other side and his leaving all the plans and notes, and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle doing the same where he like, if I come back, this is what I'll say. Like these are the keywords to look for. If a medium is claiming that they're speaking to me, they won't, like, you can know that they're not being honest unless they do these things. I wonder if they would do that if they reanimated somebody's brain.
They've got to.
If you have this awareness, think about a blue duck or something, and they could look in the parts of their brain and see if they're like, they're thinking of something.
Yeah, I don't know.
If the right synapses are connecting and stuff to like visualize something.
They're quote unquote close to being able to like read minds using technology. I don't know if that's even true or not, but if all this combines and they all figure out the ethics of it, I think they're close to being able to at least bring a person who's brain dead. They might be able just to literally bring you back to life. It makes me think of. Oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say I saw like an article the other day that said something about they recently were able to wake up someone that had been in a coma, like by stimulating certain parts of the brain.
Yeah.
They like figured out what buttons to press, basically, like what to jog to wake somebody up from a coma, which is wild. I'm sure it wouldn't work in every scenario because if there's a stroke or damage to different parts of the brain, it would probably change that. But still, to be able to on command wake somebody up from a coma is a big deal too.
They blend that technology with this technology.
Whew. So many. I love science. I really do. I'm terrible at math, and that would have prevented me from ever getting any kind of biology or any type of science degree. Chemistry just stopped me in my tracks in high school. I aced it, but I hated it.
It'd be so much. It would do so much for science, but it would be such a like what if the soul was like an actual like literal tangible thing and you bring a person's body back? Well, what if the soul's gone and it's just a living
zombies? Like
it's zombies.
All of our pop culture has known this for forever. It's not alive, but it's not dead. It's undead.
Talk about tempting fate. Like in the last episode.
Yeah.
Is this our monkey's paw? Our twisted claw? Is this it?
This might be.
They need to stop doing this. It's 2021.
Making wishes that, it's the whole careful what you wish for. Like,
oh, God. Full circle from episode 1. Be careful what you wish for. The undead. Yeah, I can't handle it.
You never know what you might cause. Yeah, thanks for that. Thanks for all that
Don't
info.
bring someone back from the dead. You never know who you're going to get.
Ooh. My gosh. And have you ever, this is a whole nother thing, but Black Mirror has that episode where they use AI to do a similar thing.
Yes.
I won't spoil it for anybody that hasn't seen it, but go watch that episode because at first you think this is the greatest thing to ever exist. And then as the episode goes on, you start to realize, be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, it's so bad.
So
it makes me think of Hector Con Carne. Did you ever watch Evil Con Carne on Cartoon Network? The brain in the like soup, the chemical cocktail, like glass ball. And he was like evil and alive. And it was all about him trying to find like a host, like a body.
That's really funny.
Isn't that crazy?
Con Carne, like with meat, with body.
Evil with meat. Only the brain and the stomach survived. But he's just like floating in like a chemical soup. That's it. It's just like, here I am, I'm alive.
Sounds like a bad soup to me.
Sounds like a bad soup. And that is Are You Afraid of the Dark being ahead of its time.
Always. So many times. So often. Or really just horror being ahead of its time in general. Okay. So then Dr. Vink begins to, he does the nutbag quip because behind his back, Danny calls him a nutbag. And then he keeps talking to them about the riddles and the brains. And then a minute later, he turns back and he says, and I am not a nutbag. And they both are like, oh no, because, kind of, he shouldn't have heard that sort of thing. And apparently that happens several more times whenever he's introduced. It's like a little running joke.
Nice.
And so he then gives the first riddle to the boys. And the first riddle is, how far can you walk into the woods? When I first heard that, like, I knew the answer because, I don't know, my family likes riddles and my sister likes wordplay and stuff. Yeah. Did you know the answer when you heard it?
The first one, I was, I think, half paying attention to the actual riddle. So I didn't like think about it. I was like, I'm about to find out the answer. So I didn't like think about it that hard.
Yeah.
The main riddle, I know like the back of my hand because I remember it from when I was a kid. But no, I didn't really like get a chance to think about it before he answered. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah. I mean, sure, man. Sure. Makes sense. It's fine.
Denny is like arguing and he says it's too hard and he doesn't, whatever. And then Buzz answers and says halfway because after that you'd be walking out.
Yeah.
Dr. Vink's like, you may do. Very good. He's impressed with Buzz's riddle solving skills. And at this point, Denny's like, okay, well then let us call our parents. We need to call our parents now. And then Vink gets these like garden shears, these giant scissors, and he makes a big show of like threatening to cut the cord on the phone.
Like, why was there a phone in this cabin? Like
that was my next question.
I don't get it. He seems totally like,
out of place.
Distance. He's totally off the grid. There's no way there's power out there in this cabin in the 90s at least.
Yeah, it doesn't seem.
He sure has a phone.
Seem that there
would
be
phone lines.
But they got a phone. They got a phone service, and he's gonna cut the cord if they don't listen, basically. And he basically says they're gonna play his way, which is just ugh.
Yeah, right.
And then he tells them if they solve another riddle, then they can call their parents, and if not, then they have to leave.
Yeah.
That's all he says. And Buzz is like, no, I can do this. I'm good at riddles. I got it. And
Buzz looks at Denny and he goes, let's do it. I'm good at riddles.
And
I was like, what?
I'm good at riddles.
I'm good at riddles. He just looks so dumb. Poor kid. I don't know.
I'm good at riddles.
I'm just like, how is he directed?
I know.
Why is he saying it like that?
All of his dialogue is kind of like that. It's all like over projected.
It's a little bit off. Either he's screaming it or he's like, I'm good at riddles.
Yeah.
Did you also notice around this point when Vink goes to grab the barrel and you see like his full kind of person for the first time, like his like robe and everything he has going on. There's a handprint on the back of his robe on the butt. Did you notice that? Yeah.
No.
So it's like either he was just like, had like a dirty hand one day and just went for like a butt scratch, or there was a situation in which somebody was in his vicinity who gave him a little smack in the tush.
Oh my goodness. This is scandalous.
One of the funniest things.
I have to go back.
I'm assuming it's just a butt scratch from himself.
That's another level right there.
Little details like that. I'm going to try to find them.
I'm for it. I mean,
so I was like, Dad, look at that handprint.
Get your giggles, Vink.
I like to think that somebody gave him a little smack. Somebody. I don't know who.
Maybe it was his wife, the witch.
Maybe it was Mrs.
That'd be
Clove.
nice.
She stopped by after her Halloween.
Oh, she lives in a big old house by herself and kicked him out to the woods to do his experiments. She doesn't like him.
That's his man cave. He just needed to get out.
Yes, yeah. I like this. Yes, I think that's exactly what's going on.
Listen here, Clove. I'm going to the woods. I'm going to go make some more ghosts.
So as we hear, Buzz is good at riddles, and he's like, we should do it. And so they decide to agree to these terms.
Good at riddles.
And so then Dr. Vink gives them the riddle, which is as follows. What is it? What? Okay, I'm going to try that again. Let's
take it back. All right.
Yep. And
how many White Claws?
One more time. Just the 2. It's not bad. Just 2.
Sure.
The riddle is as follows. What is it that has no weight, can be seen by the naked eye, and if you put it in a barrel, it will make the barrel lighter? I knew this answer, but I couldn't remember if I knew it from this show or if it was from like a book, because I was the kid that like checked out like riddle and joke books from the library.
Yeah.
So I don't know, but it's a pretty good one.
It's a good one.
And I mean, it's not outside the realm of like possibility for a kid to come up with, as just hearing it the first time. So that's pretty good, but it's still like a head scratcher.
It definitely is. I remember taking it to school and being like, you guys like riddles? And I was like, I thought I was the cool kid because people couldn't answer it. They're like, I don't know. It's a tough one.
I like stumping people. I did, especially as a kid. That was fun.
I just like having talking points. Like, I'm the kind of guy that listens to podcasts on the way to like a thing, like an event.
Yes.
Just for the talking points.
Me too. Without podcasts and TikTok, no one would ever want to listen to me.
Woof. Tell me about it.
Oh, I have fun facts, but I always have to study up before I'm expected to interact with people. So yeah, he gives him this riddle, and Denny is like, I hate riddles. Like, it obviously is just like the kind of kid that just gets mad when he can't, immediately answer something, or he feels like he looks stupid. He just gets mad. And we all know kids like that.
Me.
But Buzz is also stumped, which is kind of a bummer. And then Vink pulls this like Willy Wonka where he's just like, oh, you can't get it? Never mind. And he just goes to read his book and like across the room.
Yeah.
And they're like, okay, but I mean, like they're like, what do we do? And he's like, oh, go, be gone. Like it's just very Willy Wonka. Like, you're no use to me anymore.
Very
like,
dismissive. Yeah.
I have to get on with my day now. Yeah. So dismissive.
I thought you were smart.
Yeah. He says, you're just like the others. And then they're like, what others? And he literally says, go away. So he gives them directions to this dirt road, and he tells them that there's going to be this taxi cab that's going to pick them up. And then they're like, no, that's whack. And then he suggests an alternative, which is that they could provide him with a quote unquote specimen. And he remarks that Buzz is smarter than Denny gives him credit for. So the boys are kind of, not sure how to respond to this. And then he turns around and grabs this giant jar. And, it's the big reveal where he turns around and shakes it in their face. And it's this big giant jar with what seems to be a human hand inside of it.
Which, that's pretty dark.
That is pretty dark
that
when
got
you
me.
think about it.
I was thinking about it from a kid's perspective. I was like, oh, shoot. Think about it. You're in this cabin. This creepy dude is like, well, if you can't solve my riddle, you can give me a piece of your body.
Sure, that's a trade-off.
Give me part of you.
I will chop off your hand right now.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's very,
it's pretty spooky.
Yeah, the peril there, it's very immediate, and you realize that he's done it before. It's not like, you realize that he has been violent.
Yeah, he's been violent. He has harmed other people.
Yes.
Even children. Maybe even especially children.
Oh, and that's too much. That's so much. So yeah, like, it's kind of cheesy 90s, fake hand, and they run away. But in this context of the story, it's not a fake hand, and he's mutilating people in the mountains. So awful. So of course, like classic 90s style, they scream and they run. I like the camera, like the shot of this, like they run out of the hut and the camera's like tilted on its side, like watching them almost from the ground. And he kind of comes out and looks on after them and does his laugh.
Yeah, it's like a Dutch angle.
Yes,
that kind of like
Dutch
askew.
Angle.
Yeah.
Yes, things are askew. And so at this point, we end up popping back out of the story to hear from Midnight Society, and then so they're debating the riddle and whether it can actually be solved. And I think Kristen calls it a cheat. She's like, that's a cheat, which I think is funny because it's phrasing that we wouldn't use like now today normally, but that's a cheat. It's like we would say, I would personally probably be like, it's a trick.
Right.
But Gary is like pretty optimistic, and he's like, maybe it can be solved. And he seems to be like catching on to something. So Frank is just basically, still sitting there blindfolded, and he's like, or you could just like let me tell the rest of the story instead of like guessing so that I could get out of this damn blindfold. So they're
so
like,
angry.
okay. And he's also so like, lighten up.
Yeah, I love the way they talk.
Me too. It's just so classic 90s.
I never really talked like that as a kid, but I tried to like quote things like that and use the quotes because I thought that's how you were supposed to talk.
Me too.
Like read my lips and stuff like that. Like
how
people don't.
Well, I don't know what you would call it, but it was very prevalent in the 90s.
Very prevalent.
It's like it's slang, but it's not. Like there was slang, but the slang in the 90s was way more.
I don't know if it's like what adults thought like literary slang was.
Probably.
So strange.
But I didn't mind it. I like it now because it feels nostalgic to me now.
I love the nostalgia of it. Yeah.
And speaking of that, like, so when Frank gets back to his story, he says, Denny and Buzz beat feet back into the woods.
I remember that, beat feet.
And that is such an uncommon idiom. And that one I'm personally like fine with the fact that it died out. Because I don't like that.
We would have said like
booked it,
busted tail, or something like that. Like it's crazy.
Hightailed it. All different ways to say hauled ass.
Yeah, they hauled ass for sure.
But like beat feet. Ugh.
Beat feet.
I have a note to mention that this is actually the only episode, which, I guess they do introduce new people from time to time, but this is the only episode where the storyteller remains blindfolded for the whole story.
Oh, yeah.
Which is kind of funny. So, scary hand brandished in front of them. They run screaming, and then they are discussing it. And of course, the first question is, was that somebody's hand? Which, yes, that's what that was.
In case you're wondering.
And then they call him a lunatic, and they say when they get home, they're going to call the cops on him. You know, they're kind of catching their breath. They've magically found their way to this dirt road. Then when Denny says, yeah, get real, there's no cabs in the woods, then obviously horn honks.
Yep.
And you see 2 headlights that shine through the trees, which is like a nice horror like visual.
That's 2 in a row now, with the pilot and then this cab.
Yeah,
the headlights.
just the car creeping, headlights
the creeping
creeping.
car.
It's pretty dark because it's that idea of the stalking, or the idea of there's something coming for you and
it's
you can't outrun it.
Very serial killer stalker-esque. It's very spooky, yeah.
Serial killer, yeah. Definitely. There are so many like serial killers that use cars or that carjack or whatever. So something about it.
All the movies about serial killers, it's all, or even the documentaries. I mean, just there's so much emphasis on moments where they were driving a car, or a car was spotted, or somebody got into a car that shouldn't have got into, and somebody had like a license plate and a description. It's always car focused, car centered. It's so crazy.
Because, yeah, I mean, people...
They made their getaways.
Criminals fleeing. It's getaway car.
Yeah.
And, I mean, same kind of going back to what we were saying earlier, like the fear of being kidnapped as a kid or whatever. It's like you always were on the lookout for sketchy-looking cars. Oh, always. Because you could just be snatched in at any point.
We had, like, a neighborhood gang as a kid. Like, we were riding our bikes everywhere. We were super cool. We were booing houses. But, like, we had adults stopping to talk to us as we were out, like, playing. Cars would stop. And they would talk to us and try to get us to answer questions or come over. Like, it happened.
Yeah.
So did you ever have that experience? Did you play outside a lot?
Yeah, I played outside all the time, but it was drilled into me to avoid any cars that I didn't know, people that I didn't know. And even to this day, like, I work downtown where we live, and occasionally I'll be walking and have a car, like, roll down the window, try to talk to me. Usually it's people asking directions or whatever.
Yeah.
But even in those instances, I'm very wary of, like, walking toward the car.
That's what they do. They ask for directions, though. That's the thing, is always like, hey, you guys know where this is? Even now, as an adult, if somebody tries to stop and talk to me, ask directions, I get spooked.
Yep.
I'm like, I mean, you have a phone, don't you? Like,
sure. And that's always my question. There are other ways you could figure this out. Like, you shouldn't be asking me.
I'm not about
Not
that.
to say that I'm not a helpful person, but like, man, I'm jaded.
I think it's cautious. I think it's careful. There's because people do get kidnapped. People do have things stolen. People.
Yes. It's Ted Bundy, you know.
Yes,
it's
exactly.
The guy with the crutches, you know, help me with
that's like the perfect example. I am crippled. I need help.
Someone is vulnerable and needs help.
I need help with my car.
Some people are quick to act on that kind of stuff. And I want to be quicker, but Ted Bundy.
But Ted
I know
Bundy,
too much.
He was, apex predator. And it's just so scary. So all that to say, if you're a child and you're listening to this, stop. But also, if you're an adult or if you are listening to this, like any good true crime podcast, I listen to so many of them. They all just say, hey, just think twice. Just be careful.
Just think twice. Just run it over one more time. One more thought.
It's not your fault if it happens, but you might be able to prevent it and save yourself a world of pain.
Yes.
Like, that's the main thing. I mean, that's just why we teach our kids to be careful and don't trust strangers. Don't talk to strangers.
Yeah.
That's it. That's a good rule for everyone.
It is.
It's so scary.
Yes. So, yeah, this old-fashioned cab pulls up to the boys in this dirt road in the woods, and there's this insert shot of the, like, where the phone number would be up at the top. I can't remember what it's called, but where the lights on the phone number would be.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a series of 4s, like all 444.
I was wondering what that meant.
Like, that's I definitely dug in and tried to, figure out what the 4s would be. And I couldn't find anything like pointing to what they did as far as what was intentional. Mm-hmm. But I did look up like 4s in numerology.
Oh,
and
yeah,
supposedly like 4s are a number symbolizing reliability and stability and order.
That's so spooky.
So it could be like trusting, like, this is something that should be normal. This is a convention that people understand is safe. And
you're getting in the cab. It's reliable. It's there. You can trust it's going to get you where you need to go. Mm-hmm. But in this instance,
it's sinister and that it's totally untrue.
It's a bit sinister. I love that it's not a series of 6s. It's a series of 4s.
Yeah. Something different.
It's once again that child horror show trope of something that is trustworthy, seemingly harmless, And yet,
and they
it's
do.
not what
You know,
you
the
thought it
boys
was.
they pile right on into the back
they
seat.
get right in.
Let's
They're
trust
like,
the scary cat.
what does he say? Boy, we're glad you're here, or something like that.
Yeah, our parents will pay the fare. You know, that's what they say.
Yeah, they're so relieved.
But it is supposed to be a safe convention.
It's supposed to be safe. It's supposed to be a series of 4s. You know.
Yes, stability. I guess.
I
wish that I knew. I would like for that to be the reason, but I don't know for sure.
We're gonna go with yeah. We're gonna go with
We've
yeah.
decided that's why.
Yeah.
Why they did it. Because we know better than DJ McHale.
No, I think that was his intention.
Yeah, so they pile into the cab, and the driver adjusts the rear view mirror to talk to them, which I really like that shot. I like shots with mirrors and things like that. It's really kind of difficult to do that well, but I think they did. But he adjusts the mirror, and it's Flynn. And it's Flynn with like a ton of makeup. It's Flynn, but he's, you know, totally white out face, and his eyes are red, which clearly it's not meant to be makeup. He's meant to be, you know, dead.
Yeah, well, we know about that.
Yeah, we do. We really intimately know about that.
We've done cheap makeup for no budget movies before. On yours truly.
Made movies, and you've played dead people, and I've applied dead people makeup, and yeah. So we understand. It's kind of hard to do this well.
I mean, ours looked better aside from the glitter and the makeup.
They really packed it on.
They really made him look dead. Like really theatrically dead.
Theatrically dead. I think that's a good way to put it. It's very theatrical.
You could tell he was pale from the second balcony, for sure. But anyway, yeah, so Flynn back with a vengeance.
Yeah, it's Flynn, and he says that he gives rides to people who can't answer Dr. Vink's riddles. You know, that's the name of the game. And I mean, that's like nobody's mentioning where these rides are going.
Yeah.
He's like,
yeah, even they're kind of like, oh, so how long have you been doing this? Like they're like, they're like chatting them up like it's a first date.
They kind of are.
Like,
and I kind of like that too, the way that it's kind of done. You know, he's kind of tossing these lines over his shoulder like he just is a cabbie that's talking to his passengers, which is pretty funny. Yeah. But he tells them, you know, he gives rides to people who can't answer riddles, and he says it happened to me around 40 years ago. And of course, this is the moment where everybody's like, 40 years ago, what do you mean? But he tells them that he gave Dr. Vink a ride to his cabin, and then when he couldn't answer the riddle, Dr. Vink took a specimen from him, and then they're like, what do you mean? And then he holds up his sleeve with no hand in it. So that's supposed to tell us that it was his hand that was in the
You mean his
jar.
hand was the hand in the jar?
That is seemingly what has happened.
Crazy.
And they're still, you know, talking to him. They haven't quite caught up yet. Like, they've been pretty, you know, on top of it, I guess. Not really. I guess they were lost in the woods, and maybe not. Maybe these boys aren't the most on top of it, but they're still not quite picking it up.
They're not as good as Kevin and Dougie. Kevin and Dougie were on top of it.
No, they were on top of it. Kevin and Dougie in The Tale of the Twisted Claw. They are on top of it. These guys are a little slower on the uptake.
These guys are a little dumb. They're pretty stupid.
And so they then finally begin to wonder what happens to the people who end up in the cab. And Flynn just says that Dr. Vink needs his specimens. Which,
God.
Ew.
I got a big old specimen for you, Dr. Vink.
Oh, God. I did not need to hear that. No.
Talking about my leg.
Did you leave the handprint on his robe?
Yes.
Was it you?
What if you find out?
Should have just told me. Could have come clean.
What if you find out that Flynn's hand, was the one that left the handprint on his...
Oh, my God. Well, that could be. Who knows? Who knows, really? We don't understand what they've been doing out here. They've been in the woods for 40 years.
Mrs. Clove going, oh, Dr. Vink, we can play lemon mouth.
So we've learned now that perhaps there's something budding between Flynn and Dr. Vink. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah, sweet romance. He was his first.
He was his first.
Who's going to tell Mrs. Clove? My God, what a scandal. She did kick him out, though, so she kind of had it coming.
That might have been why.
Oh, she found out. Aww.
We're really figuring this out here.
Aww.
You heard it here first, folks.
God, there is a love triangle in Are You Afraid of the Dark? And I'm so glad we've just uncovered it. I'm so We're not even 3 episodes in, and we've already got this figured out.
We cracked a mystery. Cracked a mystery, solved a code. One of those things.
We solved the mystery. We solved the code. We did the crack.
Bill Cosby
we
now?
did crack. No, not Bill Cosby.
No, I had Bill Cosby.
I like to drug.
Hey, Bill.
Like to put drugs into
women. Do you
women.
want to hear more about what happened to
Teach me about your French bread pizzas. Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So
Yeah.
what happens to the people who end up in the cab? And Flynn's like, Dr. Vink needs his specimens. And then Denny still hasn't caught on quite yet. Just an angry child. He yells out and he argues and he's like, you're a liar. Like, you can't be that old. Basically, because he looks to be roughly in his 30s, late 30s, early 40s, maybe Flynn does.
Yeah.
But he says that this incident happened 40 years ago. So we know something's amiss here. And so this was my favorite moment of the whole episode. And I mean, most of these episodes have like a good reveal, like a big moment, like a big scare or whatever.
Oh, I know what you're going to say.
Real casual. Flynn still talking like a cabbie, tossing it over his shoulder to the boys. He says, didn't I tell you? Before I gave Dr. Vink my specimen, I got in a nasty little accident. Crashed right into this big old tree. And he says, you might say,
I sort of died.
I sort of died. And he spins his head around 180 degrees and you hear the snapping of his neck.
It's spooky.
It's spooky. Like, it's pretty dark.
That's pretty dark. Honestly.
It is honestly.
That is The Exorcist, where
Yes.
her head spins around.
Yep.
And straight up, Beetlejuice,
Yes,
which kind of
so Beetlejuice.
directly references The Exorcist when his head spins around.
Mhm.
But this is pretty much a Beetlejuice move, where his head pulls
Yes.
the 180 and he gets to talk to them directly. That is so
Mhm. I had Beetlejuice in my
spooky.
note to say because it's just like it's unsettling. And so then he says, you know, I sort of died.
It honestly, it like got me.
Yeah, because it's
And then he
he's
cackles.
so casual about to think about the dialogue he's actually saying. He's like, I got in a nasty little accident. I crashed right into this big old tree, and then he has this. You might say I sort of died. Like there's this big moment of like evil feeling. Oh. My kitty's yelling. That's a Buzz.
That's Buzz? Oh.
Yeah, Buzz wants to be in the podcast.
He is
that's
official.
pretty dark, isn't it, buddy? He jumped whenever we watched it together. He didn't like this moment. But you see just Flynn's face in this frame. So you see just his face, and he's turned around 180 degrees on his neck.
Ugh.
And I mean, this is like almost 3 decades later, and it's still like
spooky.
I'm like aware of the bad makeup. I'm aware of everything, and it is still really disturbing.
It was a good job.
To look at.
They did good for sure.
Yeah, I think they did well. Then the boys scream, of course, and you get a shot of the cab just flying down this winding road in the forest, and that also just freaks me out. Not to mention the fact that we know now that he has this accident, but also just the speed at which they're going and the winding road and the trees everywhere. Like, this is unsafe, very unsafe. And then he continues to very casually explain how all the passengers died just like him because every night he has the same accident on the same route. And then he's like, you might say I'm kind of cursed.
Yeah.
It's dark. Like, there's a lot to that. Like, all of these people just casually die. Like, that's how he's talking about it. It happens every night.
It's very Tower of Terror too. Like they relive the crashing of the elevator.
Continues to happen every single night.
That's the recurring ghost story. I love that.
Yeah, it's a very, very common theme in ghost, lore in general, is this like idea that there's this tragedy or this accident that is very like you can't get past it.
Yeah.
And so it just continues
you
to
have
happen.
to relive it over and over until you settle the unfinished business.
Yes.
Yeah.
Very common. I like that they included it. Really freaks me out. And that type of trauma really freaks me out. Car accidents, we talked about it in the episode prior, but that whole idea just absolutely terrifies me. Always
Lots
has.
of parallels.
Yeah.
In the first 2 episodes.
And so he's saying, all these passengers died just like me because every night I have the same accident. And then Buzz is like, he references back to those vibrating, shaking bushes outside of the cottage. And he's like, that was what we heard. Like, those are the ghosts. And then Flynn is basically saying, yep, and none of them can leave until somebody solves the riddle.
Boom.
And like, he was hoping that the boys could break the curse. But then he goes, and this got me too. He goes, wait till you see the accident and it's a real doozy.
God.
And I'm just like,
I love that.
hate it.
I
love it, hate it. It's just so dark. And then he's basically telling him, but you still got some time. We don't crash for another 30 seconds. Think fast, boys. And it's just the pressure is now on for Buzz to come up with the answer to this riddle.
Yeah.
Okay, so I have a really awful, horrific, terrible, tragic aside right now.
Wow. All right.
Yes. Oh my gosh. I don't know that you've heard of it. I can't remember if we've ever talked about it. I remember vaguely hearing about it because most of the articles are from the incident occurred in 2011.
Really?
And I remember hearing about this type of stuff at the time. So I started to like look for lore about ghostly cab drivers or like phantom cab drivers. And of course, in the mix of that, you start to get the hitchhiking ghost kind of lore. And we know that that's not a new concept. We're not inventing it.
Right.
Are You Afraid of the Dark didn't invent it. And in fact, they use it many other times.
Yeah.
All kinds of films. The Haunted Mansion, like hitchhiking ghosts are very common in lore.
It was kind of like brought into mainstream awareness through the Alvin Schwartz Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yes, Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
He collected a lot of these old, more modern urban legends and lores that are just so scary.
Yes.
So I think he popularized this idea.
Probably.
It had been around. And he just sort of like, so a couple of his famous ones had to do with like hitchhiking ghosts and such.
And I mean, it's so common in ghost stories. Personally, I might talk about it another time, but the only ghost that I think I've really seen with my own two eyes in my life was also walking along the side of the road.
Yeah. I just saw one recently I told you about.
Yes.
On the side of the road. Yeah.
Just a very
so
common
spooky
thing.
Yeah.
But it's so common. This whole phenomenon still blew my mind.
Okay.
So
I'm ready.
Have you ever heard of the haunted cab drivers in, I want to make sure that I say it right, Ishinomaki, Japan?
Oh.
You probably have.
The only thing I can think of is the aftermath of the tsunami.
That's exactly what I'm about to talk about.
A lot of people started to see
exactly it.
ghosts everywhere. Yes.
Yes. So this tsunami killed almost 16,000 people in 2011.
God, devastating.
16,000 people at one time, which is unfathomable to me. But related to cab drivers, as you mentioned, there was widespread, like I'm talking widespread, like dozens of reports of cab drivers that were experiencing ghost passengers around the time. And it came back out in the media around 2016 because this college student in Japan did like a thesis, like a sociological thesis on it. But these cab drivers were stopping to pick up people who then literally just vanished into thin air. Some of them like were talking with the drivers. Oh, the worst one that I read about, this cab driver had a woman that got into the cab, like a ghostly looking woman, got in the cab and, you know, he starts the fare. And she just started asking him repeatedly, have I died?
Oh, yeah.
Have I died? Have I died? Just over and over. Have I died? Then she disappeared before they reached the destination.
That is so spooky to me.
A ton of news outlets have reported on it. USA Today reported on it. Not to say that's like the be all end all, but just I happened to click on that article. Most of the cab drivers just act like this is normal. Don't seem to be very fazed by it. A lot of them have had ghost passengers.
A lot of people die every day, but it's like there were so many in this one place that they couldn't all leave at the same time.
Yeah.
So it's almost like they had to like pass through the hourglass one by one grain at a time almost. Like, and a lot of them couldn't leave yet. They had to wait their turn. It was just so highly concentrated that it took time for each of them to move on.
God.
But I love that because they're just like, oh yeah, I have passengers all the time. I can't explain. They just disappear.
And what I was reading said most drivers, like I guess in that area or that region of Japan, like they get into the cab and the fare automatically starts calculating like as they go. And so most of these cab drivers just pay the fare themselves.
That's what I was about to say. That is so beautiful to me.
Yeah, they just pay the fare.
It's like, I guess that's their way of saying, this is my contribution to you moving on. If I give you your ride, if I give you your lift to where you need to go, and I pay your fare, you get to move on. I helped you get to where you needed to go. I love that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, look it up if you want to. There's a ton of like articles and resources on it. But
I'm so glad you found that because I did not think about that at all. I'm so glad you looked that up.
God, I mean, it's not directly, it's not the cab driver is not a ghost, but
no. I mean, it still ties
very
in.
ghostly cab driver related story, nonetheless.
No, it's perfect.
So back in the death cab of Flynn.
Flynn's Death Cab. That's a good restaurant name.
Ooh.
Oh, there's a Death Cab for Cutie, but whatever.
That
little thing.
That
little blip on the old music radar. Inconsequential music. Only one of my favorite bands of all time.
Fantastic. Yeah, amazing.
I'm a hipster.
But yeah, back in the cab, Buzz, reiterates the riddle for the audience. Anybody that's forgotten, I will remind you as well. What has no weight can be seen by the naked eye, and if you put it in a barrel, it'll make the barrel lighter. And then there's this really... I feel like it was a little bit out of place, this shot next, where, he reiterates the riddle and then Denny is like comically like pretending to choke him and he's like shaking Buzz. And I'm like, yeah, that'll definitely help him figure it out. But I think it was like they needed to break up that peril to keep that rating or something, probably. They had to break it up a little bit, and that was kind of
you're going to choke
comic
him.
relief.
I guess so. I thought it was out of place, too.
Yeah. So they start arguing over the possibilities of what the answer could be, and Denny's like, helium, and Buzz is like, you can't see helium. And then he's like, you can't see air, and so they're kind of arguing with each other. And then they repeat the riddle way too many times, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And then Buzz finally comes up with it. And he says, it's a hole in the barrel. This is just like moments, and he shouts it too. Same thing, projects it real loud. A hole!
It's a hole!
In the barrel! And just moments before, I guess, the crash is about to happen, like suddenly we kind of swirl out of the frame, and then we cut to the boys just kind of landing on the ground, like on the grass near the tree. And we don't see the cab anymore. So they did it. Buzz did it.
They did it. They
proved
solved
himself.
it.
I say they. They didn't. Buzz did it. Props to Buzz. No props to Denny. Props only to
Denny
Buzz.
sucks.
But they celebrate and they're saved.
They hug and then they like push each other away. They're like, ugh, gross.
Yeah. Oh, typical brothers.
Typical bros.
But then Denny even is like, it wasn't us, but it was, Buzz. It was you.
It was you, buddy.
And he says, even though you saved our lives, you're still a loser, basically. And then I rolled my eyes like 4 times. And then we see some headlights coming over the ridge again with the headlights, but this time it's a park ranger.
Yeah.
And then he's like, are you Denny and Buzz Crocker? And then he says, like, your parents? He says that their parents have been looking for them, and he says the whole town is in an uproar.
Yeah.
So they've been missing for a while at this point, I guess.
They've been gone for a while.
It was one day and one night. But, I mean, that's a long time for kids at their age,
That's
I
true.
guess, so.
That's true.
And in the woods. Which begs the question, why did you let them go into the woods, just the two of them?
Right,
But-
right.
So, but the park ranger is like, what are you boys doing up here anyway? And then Buzz does his funny little line. He's like, tell me something. How are you at riddles? And he just smiles, this grin, smile.
I hate like precocious children.
I know. Precocious is the word, yeah. How are you at riddles?
Stop it. Stop talking to me like you're an adult. You're a child. I don't like being sized up by a little boy.
I kind of like, I don't know about like the delivery I don't like, but I like kids that are, smart.
Makes me uncomfortable.
Tell you off.
I don't like kids that are smarter than me. You don't teach me, I teach you.
So then the ranger takes them home, and it's happily ever after, except for like, all the dead and maimed people, I guess.
Well, so I was going to say this. I think about those people that didn't solve the riddle. And I think about these boys.
Mhm.
Okay, say they didn't solve the riddle. This taxi crashes. They are brutally killed in this car wreck. I mean, mangled, battered, and it's inexplicable. So how are they found, right? Does Dr. Vink come down the hill, collect their bodies, and then just drag them back up the hill?
Yeah, I guess he does.
It's interesting to me because I think because that sheriff or whoever, the I don't know.
Park ranger.
Shows up like instantly. What would he have seen? How would he have explained that?
Don't know.
Just 2 murdered bodies of little boys. I mean, I think about like a coroner having to figure out like how these kids died.
What happened to
them?
them?
I'm like, yeah, because they have to look into like the cause and the manner of death.
Mhm.
I mean, cause was like clearly some kind of a car wreck or something, some blunt force trauma.
Now we're getting on a lot of tangents, but have you there's a story, I cannot remember the name of the mountain. I would have looked it up, but the hikers that died, and it looked as though they'd been crushed in an avalanche, but there was no evidence of an avalanche.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of like that.
Yeah.
So we jump back out to the Midnight Society. Frank finishes off the story. No one ever saw the cab again. And when the boys brought the police back to the cabin, so in this universe, they were, I guess, presumably trying to figure out all this crime and what's going on.
Sure.
But they brought the police back, and nothing was left but an old stone foundation covered with weeds.
Yeah.
The end. And so Gary, then leads everybody in this silent vote for Frank's induction and has him do thumbs up or thumbs down, and everybody gives a thumbs up. And so it's unanimous, and Frank is now a member of the Midnight Society. Congrats, Frank. I wish I was you. And the episode, closes with the group giving handshakes and high fives. And in my memory, I was like, they always close it out and douse the fire. In my memory, it was that always happens. But this is actually one of 21 episodes where that doesn't happen.
Really?
So there are quite a few where that doesn't happen, but that's how it ends.
Nice.
Yeah. But I do like the nod to this childlike, I can prove myself with my smarts, and I might not be big and strong, but my mind might save the day. And I think I kind of thought that way as a kid because I'm a pretty small person.
Yeah.
I'm still not even barely 100 pounds and almost 30. So it's I'm a small person, always been very small in stature, but that idea that I have a mind that's strong.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of a touch on that type of trope.
Mm-hmm.
And I still think I kind of have that fantasy somehow. It's like my mind will help me.
Oh yeah.
I'm not big and strong, but I can solve a riddle. And yeah, again with the car accident thing, it was very nonchalant, just mentioned over and over.
Mm-hmm.
Like this brutal car accident, pretty dark, very dark.
Pretty dark.
But, didn't write down to kids. It was like a tragic thing, and they included it. And
so, you know, each time they usually are, but definitely 2 times in a row now, kids are presented with a very, very like dire situation. With real life consequences to their actions that they have to figure out.
Both these first episodes are very, very urgent.
They're very philosophical and very deep. It's like you really have only a matter of time. Like it's crazy.
So let's rate this episode.
Gotcha.
I guess you rate it first because I covered it. So or would you like me to go first?
So no, I can go first. Let me think about it. So Dr. Vink, even though I love him as a villain, he's not that scary. And, the whole getting lost in the woods and then having to solve this riddle, it's not scary to me as an episode, but this is one of the ones I remember most. So I don't know what that says about me. I don't know if it's just the riddle and how proud I was to have a riddle to tell my friends at school or what, but I wouldn't say it's super scary. I would say it's, I guess I'd give it like a 4 or a 5.
Okay.
I mean, the head turning around is pretty spooky.
Yeah.
The death cab, basically, where you're gonna die if you don't solve the riddle. So impending doom is always very scary, but it's more thrilling to me than frightening. I guess I would say it was just the fact that they had to solve the riddle, and that's what was going to kill them. Basically, not.
It's just like this is an inevitability.
Yeah.
And I think it's the opposite for me, because I think we mentioned last time how realism is kind of how I mark how scary something is.
Yeah.
I gave it a 6. I would say
Nice.
6 out of 10. Mostly because of this like neck snapping car accident ghost.
The neck snapping is
and the idea of the car accident, and I agree, Dr. Vink doesn't really do it for me.
Yeah.
Not really terrified of him, but the car accident thing absolutely added to my anxiety as a child and 100% stuck with me. But I'm not worried that my, cab or Uber driver is a ghost. Like I'm more concerned with whether or not they're gonna like assault me.
Yeah.
That part's not really a fear of mine. I'm not really worried about running into a mad scientist in the woods. And I don't mind riddles. Riddles are fun.
Like being in a stranger's car is scary, and like not having control of the situation.
Yeah.
And the fact that if this was a guy in real life, he would be making like a conscious decision to wreck that cab. So it's kind of scary too. That you could basically just be in a car with like a maniac of any kind.
And I hate that I think that parallel, or that like It wasn't that situation, but that was a very similar idea to just this wild maniac that's gonna have a car accident, and
spooky.
that is very scary to me.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so that was the tale of the Phantom Cab, episode 1 of Are You Afraid of the Dark?
What do you think Dr. Vink is?
What do I think he is?
Yeah, if we're talking like supernatural entities.
I mean,
he comes back multiple times, and he's not a ghost.
He's more of like a wizarding sort of.
He kind of is.
Like weird supernatural magical guy.
Yeah.
In my mind.
He is kind of like a wizard. I don't know. He's hard to figure out. Maybe more like further episodes will shed more light on like the nature
we'll learn more
of
about him. We'll
his
track
character.
that.
Yeah. You can tell us what you think he is as well. What kind of like category he fits into. I have some ideas, but I'm going to save them till we know more about him. But
nice.
But like give us some more of your stories or things that are relevant to this, and what scared you about this episode, or what
in general, what
affiliations,
scared you as a child, yes.
Yeah, anything you have, any memories you have, or anything that you want to add to this, that'd be fantastic. So
yeah, thanks again for listening, for clicking. Please click all the rest of our buttons.
Yeah, click our buttons.
Push our buttons and subscribe.
Yeah.
I guess we can just say pleasant dreams, everyone.
Pleasant dreams, everyone. Go follow us on all the socials.
Please do.
Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to That's Pretty Dark, written and produced by Christian Baxter Mott and Kaylin Andrews.
Our music is composed by Jonathan Simmons, and our art is provided by Paige Garland at Power Girl Illustration.
Join the collective nostalgia and follow us on Facebook and Instagram at That's Pretty Dark Podcast.
Share your experiences and let us know what shows, films, or villains still haunt you from childhood at that'sprettydarkpodcast@gmail.com. Remember, you're never really alone.
So, Until next time, sweet dreams, everyone.
Let's do it. I'm good at riddles.